Before moving to the next section of inquiry in our investigation of symbiotic panentheism and its implications, we'll move next to out of the religious aspect and solely into the ontological aspect. In defining some terms, a couple of terms, we'll compare the two. The difference between ontology and epistemology in asserting a worldview or position, in this case symbiotic panentheism, and the ontological implications of such a view. Ontology, a theory of reality or theory of being, dealing with the question of appearances versus reality, or what many would call absolute reality. What does it mean to exist? Are such questions asked by ontology. How is my existence different from that of a chair, or a tree, or a chicken patty? Is there even a difference? Ontology is concerned with what is quote-unquote real and the nature of that reality. What is existence in its overall nature? Epistemology, on the other hand, concerns with the nature of knowledge and different methods of gaining said knowledge. What do you know, and how do you know it? So now we have the emergence of ontology around 1000 AD, which asks these specific questions about the nature of reality. What new concepts has ontology, that is, debating a causative force without religion per se, firmly established within society? Perception generates behavior. Global perception generates global behavior. Universal perception will generate universal behavior. What does the conceptual framework of ontology, a philosophical perception of a causative force, have to offer us? An agreement for God, which moves from the definition of his nature as a perfect being to the conclusion that he exists. The argument has several versions. One, it was first formulated by Anselm, who gave two different versions of the argument. One from, quote, the being than which none greater can be conceived, unquote. The other from the conception of a necessary being to the existence of that being. Dictionary of Philosophy and Religion, William L. Rees, page 534. In short, this states that the conception of a necessary being leads to the existence of that being. Why do we as a species seem to constantly seek a causative force, or God? We perceive our universe to be filled with beginning, end items, alpha, omega, if you will. Life begins and ends. Rivers begin and end. The atmosphere begins and ends. Our earth appears to have begun, and we believe it will end. Our sun appears to have had a beginning billions of years ago, and we believe it will someday come to an end. We think our galaxy and a beginning, or had a beginning, and we assume it may someday end. We even talk of the beginning of our universe, quote unquote, and speculate upon when and how it will end. Because we believe our universe had a beginning and it will probably come to an end, there is a need in our minds for a force that would have originated our universe. That force we will call the causative force. and religion calls God. Generally speaking, the specifics of each religion, that's another question. Since we conceive of the need for the causative force, we assume it exists. And this assumption is not unfounded. Some would say we could apply the characteristic of no beginning to the universe just as well as to a causative force. This, however, would call for the complete reversal of the direction that science is headed. The investigative process of science is leading towards the Hindu concept that occasionally the universe ends, or, quote, is dissolved. Scientifically, it is not expressed as such, but the end result is the same as the Hindu concept. What has ontology taught us about the universe within which we live? Philosophically, it makes sense that the universe had a beginning, since everything within it seems to be based upon a beginning-end format. A beginning-end format to everything within the universe implies that the vessel, the boundary within which our universe is located, likewise has a beginning and character. If the boundaries of our universe have no beginning and character, then it would be entirely different from everything within it. It would be highly unlikely that the container would not contain some of the characteristics of its contents. For example, the bottle is made out of matter in order to hold matter. Since the interior portion of the boundary would be within the interior portion of the boundary of the universe, would most probably have a beginning and character, just as do the items contained within the boundaries, the stars, the planets, life forms, etc. The whole of the boundary would therefore tend to assume the same character. To put it another way, it would be uncharacteristic of a boundary not to have some of the most basic primal characteristics of the items which lie within it, and vice versa. It would be uncharacteristic of items within a vessel to have none of the most basic primal characteristics of the boundaries within which they are located. The universe is said to have been created from nothingness. If this is the case, the causative force, if it is all-present, omnipresent, would appear to need to take on some other characteristics of the universe other than time. For time itself would have been a component of the creation from nothingness. Time would therefore appear to be a function of mass and energy. Items within the causative force would logically have some of the characteristics of the causative force and vice versa. Therefore, applying the Hindu concepts of monotheism, the soul, and eternity, the Buddhist concept of intolerance of suffering, the Christian concept of loving one another, and the Islamic concept of justice to the causative force herself may not be illogical after all.